Good. I would love to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the Ed Affairs Committee meeting, January 20th, 2026. I'd like to start with a roll call of our school board members, beginning with Mr. Epps.
Zachary Epps, present.
William Mulhern, present.
Caroline Watts, present.
Jennifer Clement, present.
Sean Williams, present.
Daniel Schultz, present.
Mia Blitstein, present. And that concludes the roll call. Now I would like to for the approval of minutes from our December 16th meeting. I have a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful. And now I would love to turn this meeting over to Dr. Savage.
Hello and welcome to our Educational Affairs meeting for January of 2026. Happy New Year to all of you. And we have a lot to cover this evening. There you go. Here's our agenda for the evening. You can see that we're going to actually talk about some Algebra 1 placement criteria revision. We have come to understand that the adoption of our new instructional materials as well as our changes in curriculum have necessitated a change in our Algebra 1 placement criteria, and we wanted to actually share that with the Educational Affairs Committee this evening. We also wanted to share some information around high quality instructional materials for K-5 ELA, English Language Arts, and the adoption process that we are in. And then from there, you can see that we have a whole cast of characters here this evening because we are going to give a strategic plan update. We are in the third and final year of our strategic plan, and we wanted to make sure we provided an update and also a launching pad into what the next strategic planning process is going to look like. We're going to move through the first two agenda items rather quickly so that we can get to the strategic plan update. Obviously, we have 7 pillars, we have an extensive presentation in front of you, so we wanted to make sure we gave space in. All right, so first and foremost, our Algebra 1 placement criteria. We have a math course sequence here in Cheltenham School District that was revised in 2019 by a previous board and administration. And at that point in time, the math course sequence was adjusted to remove the possibility of students being accelerated at early grades. So I believe prior to our actual current course pathways for mathematics, our students actually had the opportunity to accelerate in math beginning at the 5th grade level. Since 2019, we have been doing them at the 7th grade level instead. And you can see that our math course sequence actually spreads from there. All of our students are in 6th grade math together. And then in 7th grade, our 6th grade students have the option to, kind of try to select into algebra based upon a number of criteria, or they go into regular math. They have the option again at the end of math 7 to go into algebra again there. And if not, they go into math 8. We also have students who are in algebra in the 7th grade level who then move on to geometry. So that top line you see in the presentation where you see Algebra 1, you see that actually becomes a math acceleration pathway for a number of students, and that allows them to hit Calc AB or possibly even BC. In high school, and then for our other students that might not necessarily become a reality for them, there is quite a bit of research around, and I'm sure you guys have heard conversations around algebra for all in 8th grade or 7th grade. There's a lot of conversation around what developmental level and at what age students should take algebra. But what we have found here in Cheltenham is our middle school students, we actually have a smaller number of middle school students that are in algebra than we believe could be possible. So we believe that part of the Algebra 1 placement criteria issue that we've had since 2019 is the number of criteria that have been put in place. But I also want to elevate clearly that these criteria are also in flux constantly because our benchmark system has changed. We no longer give a grade 6 end of year exam teacher recommendation. There's a lot of research around the subjectivity of that and the fact that implicit bias can kind of leak into that. So we actually, especially with the birth of CDK East and the progress that we are seeing also in terms of our new 6 to 12 math curriculum, we wanted to reconsider the Algebra 1 placement criteria. So you see on this slide that there's actually 6 different criteria in place for students that would be interested in Algebra 1 placement for either 7th or 8th grade. And we will propose that we're going to take that down to 3 criteria. So first you will see that we would be looking at the end of the previous year and the current year PSSA performance scores. And we would like to actually consider students that are both proficient and advanced. Because proficiency obviously indicates that you have mastered the major work of the grade. Advanced means that you're beyond it. Acceleration in algebra should not be, well, acceleration into algebra. There's a lot of, I guess, controversy, and we could debate whether it's actually acceleration. So requiring students to have an advanced PSSA score might not be necessary. We have come across a number of students who have been proficient, but when they take an algebra placement exam, they are far above and beyond the rest of the students. So there is some kind of flux there that we have to consider. We also plan on giving an Algebra 1 placement test. I think in prior years, there was a test in Lincoln that we provided to students at the end of both 6th and 7th grade, and we are looking at reviving that test, but we want to take a look at it to ensure that it actually demonstrates, well, ask students to demonstrate that they have the foundational skill set necessary for algebra. And that requires us to take a look at the standards that are required and skill sets, and we want to make sure that the test is correct. And then grades. We actually leaned into grades and away from teacher recommendation. Grades in particular, saying that we wanted no less than a B in each of the first 3 quarters of the school year. And this actually will work for us now moving forward, because with Cedarbrook East being joined to Cedarbrook, they moved on to a quarter and semester schedule. In previous years, they were on a trimester schedule. So they actually did not line up in the same way as our middle school did, but now they do. And we're saying no less than a B because, again, you can have students that could just be demonstrating some level of apathy in class because they might be bored, but they sit for an algebra exam and blow it out. You also could have students that are placing advanced on the PSSA, do really well on the algebra placement exam, and then for purposes of grades, they might be getting C's and D's. There's a lot of different mechanisms and ways that this could manifest, but we would actually like to give all students in 6th grade and all students in 7th grade in, towards the end of the school year, this Algebra 1 placement exam, and then look at the top quartile of students to see if they have the other 2 criteria, and then begin to place students into algebra from there. When I shared this with the principals and the assistant principals and the office administrative staff earlier today, the analogy I gave was the wall that we build for kids, right? Like, we put different bricks into walls to create walls for them to climb over in order to get access. And this is an attempt to actually take some of the bricks out of the wall, because we should be screening kids into and then letting them step back from instead of keeping them out of. And that is very apparent in all of the research and all of the demographic data that we have around algebra access for our students. So here's the communication timeline. We wanted to make sure that we shared it with the board through the Educational Affairs Committee first. We do plan to take this to CIPD, which is the Curriculum Instruction and Professional Development partnership that we have with CEA in particular, just to make sure that they are aware as CEA leadership, and also that our teachers are aware of what's coming down the pike. And then we want to share this with families via letter, website posting, and those Sunday news shares, because we want everybody on the same page around what this criteria look like. And then in May, we actually would like to give the Algebra 1 placement test, which gives us plenty of bandwidth to make sure the placement test itself is absolutely correct and the thing that we need it to be. And then from there, we would send placement letters home. And because this is effective just for our 7th and 8th grade students in particular, that's the right time. Speaking with the Cedarbrook administrative team, for students that are actually placed in algebra, we would simply be able to remove them from their Math 7 or Math 8 class and build algebra sections. I will share that we piloted something similar this year, and we actually doubled the number of students in algebra, and we have not seen that there was any ill effect of doing so. We also saw that there was a demographic shift in terms of how many students and which kinds of students and how they actually identified, how they made it into those classes. And some of the stories have been phenomenal. There's kids that absolutely can and re-engage because they're given an opportunity to. And we want to make sure that we give the opportunity whenever we can. So I will pause there.
This is great. The previous criteria, memory serves, that 1 point from teacher recommendation was actually kind of a trajectory towards this. It used to be essentially all teacher recommendation. And so I think this was a compromise way to ease into something ending. My question is, just clarification question first. Those 3 criteria, is it an all boxes must be checked or any one box can be
It
checked?
actually is an all boxes should be checked.
Mhm.
We can examine students on an individual case-by-case basis, particularly for students that we know might have some significant history in their background that would give us maybe 2 of the 3 boxes that we will want to consider. Also for our students that have gifted programming, we need to make sure and check, like if they have math acceleration in their gifted program, what that looks like for them. We have a few students that are like profoundly gifted. This isn't going to apply to them because they're like in the 7th grade taking pre-calc. So it's a whole different thing. But making sure too that we are attenuating to the fact that we have many kids who might actually sit and take this Algebra 1 placement test. We might have in that quartile, maybe half of that quartile will make both of the other 2 criteria. And then we might have a third of the quartile that has one or the other. We might need to actually take a look at those individual students and figure out what that means for them. And I do want to give a shout out to Principal Metcalf because I guess in June of last year, he and I sat down and he put together a full spreadsheet so that we could do this kind of meta-analysis around how students were getting placed. And we saw that there were some issues. So we wanted to take a look at the criteria.
My other question is actually speaking to the wall analogy. What if a student only met 1 or maybe even none of these criteria, but they really wanted to take algebra? I'm curious what the pros and cons of entertaining their own agency and supporting that agency.
That's really a deep question. I think that would be a matter of having a conversation with that student and the family, and then really doing a data analysis around what the student does and doesn't know, whether or not the student could backfill the skill gaps necessary to actually be ready for algebra. Algebra is interesting because it requires certain skill sets that have been taught over a number of years before you even get to algebra. It's not so much about, what was taught exactly the year prior. So making sure the students have those foundational skills so that they can bring all of those skills together and develop the knowledge necessary to scaffold them into full proficiency in algebra is definitely a thing. I can say of our high quality instructional materials, Reveal in particular does have a number of different instructional materials packages that we could lean into to support a full blown course sequence revision if we needed to. And I think that is not like a right now conversation, but that could be a conversation for the board to consider, because that's not my decision, the board to consider further on down the line, because with so many school districts going to, algebra for all in 8th grade, like Reveal does have a mechanism by which we could do something like that, but we'd have to look at our trajectory K-7 and really backward map that to make sure all the skills were covered.
So what I'm hearing is these criteria are a placement criteria, sort of a screen pulling students in. If there was a student that didn't meet these criteria, that would be a bespoke case, but it's not outright rejection. It would be a turn.
Yeah, and we have had bespoke cases before. Some of them have actually made it up to me when I was, assistant superintendent, that we had to kind of talk through with people. But I do fully believe that the staff at Cedarbrook, that math department is ready for the challenge. And they also are seeing that they have a number of students that could actually get there quickly.
Thank you.
I love this, and I'm thinking about former algebra too. Middle school,
Long time ago for me. But thinking about how watching my own children not so long ago go through this sequence through the elementary levels and how placements were done through the high school. I'm just wondering, and I'm not even sure, like I said, this is a question, but with all the work you're doing around preparing the middle grades teachers for seeing the kids differently, seeing the placement process differently, and running the classrooms differently, and effectively what we're anticipating about doing the same work at the high school level as those same children then go through these different sequences.
Absolutely. And I love this pivot that I've just made into this director of teaching and learning role, because it will enable me to have more space and time to sit in department meetings and talk about what we're doing in PLCs and actually explore what those different trajectories look like at the high school. I was a math and science teacher. I went to school for chemical engineering, and I had a science background as well. And I think it's a great place for me to be able to lean in and, support students through building teacher capacity. And that's the intent. I think too, we have to look at what that K-6 piece looks like and make sure that we have a sound and succinct curriculum package there, well, instructional materials package there to match the curriculum we're doing. I do want to flag for you that PDE is rewriting all the math standards. So there is probably going to be some interesting things coming down the pike around that in the near future. We actually are looking at our curriculum cycle, and we probably will have to adjust it because obviously we don't want to buy new instructional materials for K-6 math, well, K-5 math, until we know what the standards are. So there might be some messiness there as we're trying to figure out exactly what the state's going to do.
Any other?
Yeah, third to depreciation around the pathway that we've been taking to take the bias out of the process. Secondly, I guess I showed that chart to my fifth graders, and they were able to explain it as well and actually think about it in their terms of, oh, I got this with my PSSA, so if I got 200 more points, like
You did the whole chart.
Yeah. So I appreciate that. Well, not that chart, the chart of the sequence math sequence.
Where they going?
Yeah, that one. Yeah, this one. And so I think part of that is the conversations that are being had in the classrooms about what is possible K to 5, but what is possible in your high school trajectory. So I think that's a small tip. That's a small anecdote, but tidbit to I think a lot of the system level conversations we're having. You probably already researched this out, but are there any policy changes needed?
No, there's no policy changes per se. In the 100 series of the board policies, there is this piece around instructional program and keeping them informed. But as we are now really starting to dig into building out the instructional program and the curricular materials, these kinds of things, and making sure that they are committed to paper and provided to the staff, and in terms of protocols and timeline, is very important to us because we want to make sure that we codify what we're doing so that we don't lose things in the future.
Yeah. That's fine. So this falls broadly under.
Yes.
All right, got it.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. I really feel like it's like a full circle, or like a swing moment from like when we went from the old way to the current way to now, so it's really interesting. And one of the things that I've heard about, and I don't know this because I was not an algebra teacher or any kind of teacher, and I don't know how our students have been testing 7th and 8th grade students that are not getting grade level instruction, or it's not really kind of like they're not getting Math 7 or Math 8. They're still taking the PSSA that year for Math 7 and Math 8.
Correct.
Algebra and geometry don't align to the PSSA state. So just curious, and I've heard both. I've heard some say the kids that are in there, they're fine. And I've heard some people say, kids take that and they're like, I didn't know this, and this because I missed it because I was taking geometry. So I'm just curious kind of how we navigate that, if that's an actual concern.
Well, it is, and I actually raised it with some of the Cedar Brook teachers when they were meeting last summer to kind of rewrite their scope and sequence for Reveal to match this. And what we're talking about in terms of numbers right now, I think we have about 59 students that are in algebra, and I want to say maybe 32 that are in geometry. So it's, about a sixth of the student population over at Cedar Brook. What the teachers were doing over the summer was actually attending to this, and Reveal in particular for your students that are looking at going into Algebra 1 in 8th grade, they have a Math 7-8 sequence that the teachers actually were kind of like playing with to pull some of the major work of the grade into the earlier half of that 7th grade year so that they could cover everything that needed to be covered for 8th grade for those 7th grade students. Now, I think the hard part about this is it's the projection and the trying to figure out which kids are going to actually get that kind of gap filler. Because honestly, the 8th grade algebra becomes then a little bit of 7th grade math review. So a whole lot of the 8th grade for the math 8, for the first half of the year, and then algebra, because they're trying to make sure they don't have those gaps. For the students that are going into algebra in 7th grade, that becomes a massive problem, because then you're looking at the math 7 and 8. But that's where the teachers and I started talking about like doing math 7 and 8 in the beginning half of 7th grade, and then doing algebra in the second half, and then them going into geometry. I think it is hard to do when you don't have everybody on it and you can't do a predictive, right? Because you can't predict which students are going into where. But I think actually us giving this Algebra 1 placement test, because we will be able to place the kids kind of on the bell curve and see where they are, we will be able to better predict who's going to try again at the end of 7th grade year, and maybe, figure out how to support them. What my biggest fear is, like, I don't want to get into tracking, and I don't want to get into a place where students based upon these scores are tracked into different classes. That's not appropriate at all. But at the same time, how do you accelerate or enrich some without actually providing detriment to others? There is a world in which we perhaps would run students through, and this would be a whole thing to ask about, but we would actually have students in math 7 and algebra 1, for example, and then math 8 and geometry or algebra 1. But that means that we would actually have students taking 2 math classes at once, and based upon the way the schedule is currently built, they would have to sacrifice electives. And we don't want to do that to children either. So there's a lot of thought that goes into these, which is why I think some school districts just lean into the Algebra for All and providing the interventions and supports, because then you don't get this inequity.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's what I've heard about Algebra for All, is that it ends up kind of being that blend of the grade level maths 8 and.
Yeah. The way
but
that
I'm also taking the keystone of the PSSA at the end of the year. So
well, the way that the Algebra for All works is the way that Reveals works. Reveal has math 6, and then there's a math 7-8 course that collapses math 7 and 8 together, paying attention to what is tested on the 7th grade PSSA and then on the 8th grade PSSA. And then they move into algebra, and they have a heavy review of 8th grade algebra in the beginning of the year, with the assumption being that students then would take the PSSA and algebra at the end of that year if they chose to. But because there is some of that math 8 revisited in 8th grade, right? Like as part of that algebra course, it brings that to the forefront for the students.
thank you. I appreciate that. I'm glad that, I'm not surprised, but I'm glad to hear that all of those thoughts we're all thinking about trying to figure out how to best serve our students in that way. Believe it or not, algebra in 7th and 8th grade I think may have maybe the thing that I have had the most questions and comments about from community members over the last 4 years. So this is good and timely, and I am excited to hear, people get to see this. Will families get this sequence when they get
Yes.
So the one thing, and I don't know if it should be added or maybe certain people explain, so I'm not sure, is that when you look at this, you're like, my kid didn't make it into algebra in 7th or 8th grade, they can only get to maybe pre-calc. That's not really true.
No,
Because
it's
we have
not.
block scheduling, you can knock out algebra. So I don't know if there's a way to put, because that's what my kids did, to be really honest, they doubled up on math so
But
that
the
they could
math
get a
course
little further.
sequence, all of this was actually created prior to the high school moving to block scheduling.
Yes.
Yes.
And now there's a little
been
more
around, been around.
A very, very long time. So when you see all these math electives and whatnot down here, students, these courses, I'm going to point to them, but these courses actually become semester courses.
Right.
So that means that at the end of here where you see math elective, if you have a student that takes a math course every semester, they can max their 4 credits out quickly, and then they have space to actually take other things.
Whether it's a math elective or a higher level math elective or something completely, there's just way more.
Photography.
It might be, whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that needs to be explained here, but I do think that when you have a kid that's younger, you don't know all of that yet.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And the other piece too that we have been working on over the course of the past few days is the actual high school course catalog, and doing a revision of that to make that more clear, and to also make sure that the prerequisites for the different courses and the difference between a core course where you get credit and an elective course that you might take just because you want to take, that delineation is clear for students.
Thank you. Any other questions before I go ahead?
Just
Brief comment just related to the journey. First, thanks for revisiting this and evaluating it, given current standards, current curriculum, et cetera. Because when I think it was just myself, and maybe we're still moving forward with this happened. It was in reference to what barriers are we building for children in front of them and potentially not to achieve their greatest. And at the time, did not have the instructional materials necessarily that we have now. So just thinking about the transition over time. As one board member who's watched it happen, this feels like a good pace is what I would say. When you think about, getting into the beginning of our equity discussions, and public education has been this way for X amount of years. It might take this long to change it. I don't necessarily believe that. And here I am on the board a couple years later to see another stage of evolution. So just kudos to administration for considering this. And then the second comment, which is relative to that, is just related to if you don't have all three of the check boxes, and that there is some amount of discussion with parent and family. I know we manage that, or I know administration manages that in various different ways, but just wanted to plug that if there is a standard criteria or a way that those discussions can be guided and led in such a way that they do consider equity, I think that would be critical for us to do. Because I think we got here in the first place because of the lack of objectivity. And so thinking about a discussion, every one of those discussions could be different in some way. And so I just want us, as one board member, I would want to see us as a district consider what a standard would look like in order to guide those discussions.
Absolutely. Because I have been thinking about like a data analysis protocol that you would actually take families through, because our students actually have a lot of different data points. We have internally been talking about like dashboards. What does it mean to have a district-wide dashboard, a school dashboard, and a kid dashboard? Because when you think about mathematics itself, you can put together a dashboard around these different learnings. And then, for example, if you have a set of standards that you need to have mastered in order to go into algebra, like where are we pulling that actual data from? What does it look like? And then how do we talk to families about that? Because that's something easily normed, especially because now we have a fast bridge screener that's a universal screener. We know which kids are taking the CDT for 2, 2, and 3. We have IXL for purposes at the little kid level of predicting how kids are coming through the pathway. Like we have data. And I think we just have to solidify what that framework looks like so that we can talk to families about it. So that work is definitely continuing. That's what we're doing this year.
Certainly love a data-informed decision. Thank you. Appreciate
Data nerd.
Shit. I appreciate it. All right.
Thank you. Before we go to Zoom, I just have one question, and I also really appreciate this conversation and having it now. As someone who has recent grad who got to APBC because he doubled up in high school, and was really grateful in college this year that he had been able to take that class because he was better equipped to take the math placement the class that he placed into as a first year college student. And block scheduling has definitely opened up that for all of our kids to be able to double that up. And I of course want to see them being able to excel instead of repeat, as we had a conversation in our last, one of our last ed affairs meetings about, needing electives and not being able to get to the electives.
Correct.
So we want to see there be opportunities for all of them to excel wherever they feel the space to. So I'm thrilled at the revision of criteria, and I really applaud reducing that criteria. I am curious if we have a family that opts a student out of PSSA, and so we just don't have that as a data point. I know that it's been discussed if we don't have all 3 boxes checked, but just throwing that out there, as I know it happens.
No, absolutely.
And so I just want to point out that if available, I see it, and that I encourage people to take the PSSA. I'm not throwing it out there as like, we should, but just to acknowledge that there certainly are families that choose that. And I wouldn't want to say that that's an X in that, an automatic X in the column, and they automatically are sort of out of the runnings. So that's more of a comment than a question.
Well, we actually did talk about it. We talked about it in terms of like, if we don't have a PSSA score, for example, shout out to Ms. Collins because she raised this earlier today. If we don't have a PSSA score, like we do still have access to the CPTs. It's a free assessment. It actually is aligned to state standards. That could easily be given to a student to determine, where they are in terms of their understanding of the standards. There are multiple measures of data that we can actually take for this. And I think that placement test in particular is going to be, I think, for the district, the first step in terms of like, which students should we be looking at? The other thing too that we do want to make clear to families, and we will their families, is they can choose to opt their students out of the Algebra 1 placement test. If you don't want your students to go into Algebra 1, you don't have to, right? But the communication that will have to go out to the families is going to need to be very, very clear, and we probably will need to have some level of like a community engagement night, a family event, or something of the sort to walk through this, as well as some office hours.
Thank you. Do we have any questions in the Zoom? I don't see anybody. I don't see any notifications, but
Yeah, there's some folks in the Zoom room.
no. Okay.
All right.
Carry on.
I know. All right. So. All right, I hand it over to you.
Sure. So starting this year, we are in the curriculum cycle of HQIM K5ELA. We did a committee here with teachers, board members, parents, we're all invited. We looked at our vision as ELA, our ELA vision for CSD, and we made a SWOT analysis through that process. The committee reviewed a plethora of programs that were submitted through our bid out of the district, and we took our rubric and we evaluated those. So we came up with 3 of our top 3 reading programs, which were Amplify CKLA in our green. Then you see HMH into reading, and Savvis MyView Literacy was our top 3. From that, this is our rubric that we looked at. Here, we wanted to make sure there was an assessment component, there was digital access. We want to make sure there was high quality instructional materials that align to Act 135, equity assessments, instructional materials, and equity stars on there again. But we looked at all of this. After taking it and narrowing it down to those 3 events, we brought it to our teachers to get their voice and input during Professional Development Day. We wanted to narrow down the rubric so they had less to look at and more attentive to what they need every single day. Professional development, they may not have a say in it. We do. So we took some of those things out. They had a half day to look at it, so about 3 hours to review those materials. And this is their rating that came across. We also hosted a parent night, board night, community night here had all 3 programs out to look at, and we had some invoice put in for there. So this was the rubric that the teachers looked at. It was the assessments, the digital component, the instructional materials with usability, and the equity piece, making sure. So right now we have the data points in from the various lenses. We are now looking at scheduling, what makes sense. And the end of November, Act 47 was just released with structured literacy. So there's new components by the state and mandates that have been put out that we want to make sure we are aligned to. They have suggested core resources, suggested interventions that they would like us to use. The universal screeners haven't been released, but we need to make sure we are abiding in by state law.
So I'm going to go back to this. Thank you, Katie. Let me start by saying this. The Pennsylvania Department of Education is actually releasing a lot of new regulations based upon laws that have recently been passed around structured literacy. And it is going to affect everything that we do. I think part of the struggle that we're having through this process is, as we are moving through the process, new things are coming out from the state, but I do want to make a couple of things clear because I think it is going to be a flaring issue. Foundations on Pennsylvania Department of Education's actual structured literacy materials list is actually a supplemental material, meaning we are not to use it as core. We have been using it as core for a number of years. Yes. Structured literacy itself is about teaching kids how to sound words out. That's phonics. But doing so, the instructional block and throughout the day, there is a requirement as well embedded in this law that all of our staff be trained appropriately so that they can support structured literacy in a multidisciplinary way and across different content areas. The other piece that's been interesting is PDE released a list of approved instructional material programs, and then they pulled the list back. And then they released it again.
At the end of November.
Yeah, at the end of November. But we had already been in process. These materials are actually on that list. Next. There's a lot going on here with these instructional materials. So Amplify CKLA in particular would allow us to actually eliminate our social studies block in the elementary schedule, because the materials that are used are actually aligned and support some of the social studies that we teach our youngest children. And that would free up time during the day for us to implement steals. Because next year, when we go into now grade 5 science testing, we are expected to cover the STEEL standards, which we are now aware are voluminous, and we need to put a 45-minute science block into the day, every day, to cover all the standards, so the kids will be prepared for that roll up into 5th grade testing. Which means if our actual instructional day is set in stone, we have to figure out how to flex within that instructional day. So that could be the benefit of Amplify CKLA. But obviously the teachers did not rate that as highly as the actual committee did, because the committee actually rated CKLA the highest. If you go back here. So that second one right there, that 3.5 with all the additional digits, that is actually Amplify CKLA. It outscored everything else. Very interesting. The next one is HMH into reading. At the 7th and 8th grade level, we actually have HMH into literature already. So we would end up with a full K-8 continuum from the same publisher that has the same lesson structure, the same, training for teachers K-8 in literacy. And it could be comforting to our students. However, it would not allow us to eliminate the social studies block. We would have then an actual literature ELA block, a science block, a social studies block, and a math block. So teachers essentially would go to 4 full preps a day. Well, 4 different full subjects to prep for every day. Right now, because of how we're running the elementary schedules, the teachers teach science and social studies on a flip-flop. And they teach a unit of science and then a unit of social studies and then a unit of science, which means that they actually are only doing 3 preps, 3 different subjects every day. And then they're kind of rotating through this, which folks seem to like. And then last but not least is SAVAS, my view. We actually had envisions for SAVAS. We are now starting to see some efficacy in terms of envisions being very effective for our math instruction, now that it's kind of taken a hold, but it is demonstrating to us that SAVAS, because of how they build their curriculum, students have to move through it for a number of years before you see it bump. So there's some question there for us too. And I'm saying that just based upon the data that we have, not based upon anything that SAVAS told us. So I think all of these programs have some benefits I also think all of these programs have some cons. But I think that as we are continuing to proceed through the process and we start having more and more conversations with teachers, we will get to a direction and a recommendation for probably the February Ed Affairs meeting so that we can then proceed to process contract, because we would like to start training the teachers this year for implementation, which means it will be on a board agenda for either March or April.
Do we have any questions?
Yes.
Can you say more about why or what the consideration of eliminating social studies is about as it pertains to the discussion of the literacy program, and just in general what we think about doing that? It conjures up bad memories of Philadelphia and limiting social studies and science going to multiple block scheduling in the and so I'm confident you're approaching this from a very different point, but I would just like to hear more.
Oh, absolutely. And Abington and Springfield have already adopted Amplify CKLA, but I can.
Moving to the convened block before if CKLA wouldn't eliminate, are just going to be shifting. So CKLA does a lot of nonfiction and history within its platform, but it doesn't necessarily say we don't teach social studies elsewhere. We've talked about taking those missing elements of the social studies standards and creating more of a PBL connected to Shelton School District aspect. So what matters to us is our justice and our vision. And right now it's not necessarily seen within our program that we're using. So can we use and hit CKLA with the standards, but allowing that time for a science continuum of fields? Right now, we're not hitting all the steel standards. 3 through 5 have a huge lift, and we're only about doing half of it. So as you're thinking of an elementary teacher and you want to do this hands-on and really engage with the science, it's hard to do all of that in a 40-minute block at the end of the day for 4 weeks and then switch it and turn it off. So instead of just hitting it because you have 30 minutes every day, let's do it with meaning and integrity. So having that humanities block would allow that time for social studies elements, but we also need to be very strategic of where we're also weaving it in other areas.
We at central office in combination with teachers would actually plan succinctly for that. And like, for example, CKLA might be teaching, I don't know, a 3rd grade unit where they are revisiting words that have prefixes, and we might then actually, based upon where kids are in the social studies standards in 3rd grade, choose a nonfiction text that speaks to that social studies standard as the way that they practice prefixes. So then there could be a conversation about how you are unwinding and unpacking the actual phonetic awareness piece of that, the phonics piece of it, and the word structure, word study piece of it. And then you can actually have a separate conversation around what does the content of this article mean that actually connects them with those comprehension standards. But I think that would require some work on our part. For us, I think CKLA could be a lift, but I'm trying to figure out like what that lift looks like and how long and how intensive. Because in some districts, they kind of just roll it out without actually thinking strategically about like the unpacking of the unit and how you build your scope and sequence, how you align all of that. But we could do that over the summer.
These are programs, not curriculum. We're very much of saying our curriculum
is what
is we want. This is a program
that we pull the materials and the stories and the lessons from.
Any other words? Well,
Maybe never. I don't even know how to phrase this. I think it's interesting to me about the state's categorization of Wilson foundations. Just because knowing it has on a research basis.
So many feelings.
Yeah, and also knowing that teachers like it and like to use it, and they know how they can learn how to use it. And Wilson has such a great kind of structure for allowing folks to use it. So I that's so mysterious to me, and I hope that we could, whatever we choose, we will continue to use it in a supplemental.
Yes,
way.
we will.
Okay. That being said, what program is Philadelphia using? I can't.
Expeditionary learning.
Expeditionary learning, okay, because that's my other, the scuttlebutt that I've sort of heard, well, it's not been great. It's not been great. I think the rollout there was sort of not great also. Well, I know we do it much better, but it's, you know, I've heard everything from like kids never read a book ever again, kind of, to, you know, people are just doing phonics all day, all the time, and never really get to comprehension or anything like that. And so I'm hoping that these programs sort of will address those types of issues. And it's so interesting to me. This is a different conversation, but like, you know, 30 years ago when I first started practicing special ed law, right? Like I would fight to get
Phonics. Yeah, I know.
right? You have to write in the IEP, you know, requires explicit phonemic based instruction, you know, all those words kind of.
Yeah. Direct instruction.
Directed, yes, systematic, direct instruction, yeah. Basically say it without saying it, and it's so interesting to me how this is flipped and relatively quickly, really, in the world of education, flipped so quickly. And like, I appreciate you guys have a very difficult balancing act to do here, because some kids really need that very systematic approach to learning, you know, learning how to read, and some kids will come to you already knowing how to read, right? And like, what do you do with those kids? And so I also assume that this has some level of like acceleration in it, and
Correct.
okay, all
That
right.
was part of the criteria that was in the rubric, because we were actually looking at the instructional materials in terms of making sure that it's in there somewhere.
And equity.
Equity and accessibility, yeah. Because we wanted to make sure that there were interventions and extensions contained. And a lot of the research right now is saying that even students that come to us already knowing how to read, the real question for us is, how did you learn how to read? Because there is now this deep body of research and knowledge around having how we need to actually develop phonemic awareness and phonics for kids so that they can sound words out later. And when I was coming up, you know, we had that font. Well, actually, I came up in a whole, what was it? The whole word.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember specifically, my father was a teacher, and he taught me to read, and I had a Johnny Could Read book, and it was phonics, right? Just like I have heard stories of families who are using books with phonics for their kids, because those phonics lessons are actually what teach kids how to take words apart, and that's how they get to the understanding of how to put words back together. And you have to write to go with that, right? I think the larger question is, what is, and this is part of where we need to get to with this, like, part of the criteria that we had was making sure that it was aligned with the science of reading, and the science of reading explicitly says that it should address not just the phonemic awareness and building, you know, phonics knowledge for kids, but also comprehension. And there is a whole package to this where you have to address both sides of that. So I think it's interesting. In the school, like my son is in a school that actually has expeditionary learning, but they have foundations as their core. So it's actually EL and foundation, so they get both. And I don't necessarily know that in Philly that is how it was rolled out. But in each of these packages, there's actually a phonics portion of the lesson and then a separate comprehension piece of the lesson. But those two things are aligned and they cycle appropriately.
Okay, I have a couple of questions, and I know we have a lot to still get through. I know, we're not very far in here. So just to speed this up, do we have qualitative data around why the committee and the teachers were not on the same page? Do we have any like anecdotal feedback? Any thoughts?
I will say that I think the committee spent more time and depth in looking at the materials than the teachers did. I also think that the teachers have friends in other districts who actually can speak to some of these things, and that sometimes that judgment comes from other people's experiences with the materials.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yes.
Again,
I'm just speculating. That's just me
Yeah,
thinking.
yeah, I'm always interested in like, why do we think that the outcomes were different?
Yeah.
Do any of these programs include time for independent reading, independent writing? Do they include differentiated materials? And do they include writing instruction?
Yes.
All of them?
All of them and all of those things.
And that's part of like what it's a core program, and the reason where right now we have like the different pieces, but it's a full package.
Okay, so all three of these.
And grammar.
Did one of them have cursive?
And one of them.
One of them
might have
had
had a low
cursive.
rating, but has cursive.
Starting in.
I wanted to say second grade. It was second grade. Yeah, cursive.
Excellent.
Forgot.
Okay, well, those are sort of my questions, just thinking about why, or what things I, as one board member and a former classroom teacher, would be interested in. And I love when we can integrate any material and we can use our time efficiently in the classroom, because there is a very limited amount of it and we have to be efficient with it. I'm curious if the HMH into reading is heavy on fiction. Is it just,
They're big, they do authentic literature.
so we're reading novels, we're reading more?
And Miss Murphy, she came in and reviewed. So she can.
Okay, those are,
Yes,
Yeah.
gave me her recommendation.
yes, I'm sorry, I couldn't make it. I'm really happy to see this report out. Mr. Schultz, do you want to ask?
Yeah, this is more of a, definitely can't be answered right here, right now, but regarding the social studies, science side conversation. I'm very curious how other districts do it, if they do it. What about Cheltenham makes it difficult for us to check all the boxes bluntly if it comes down to like the day and contractual structures?
So I actually.
That's a separate future,
I mean,
maybe
I can
offline
kinda
conversation.
answer that.
Whatever you want to say.
I'll say it real quick. I'm so sorry to
Sure.
interrupt you, but I mean, contractually, our teachers are actually, it's longer than most other school districts.
And that's good to hear. So then I would love to see
We use that time.
somehow magically do all of the above in infinite time every day. No, I'm just kidding. So the other quick subtle question about the materials is representation in novels and making sure that I know that is on the checklist, but I just wanted to vocalize that I'm assuming that whatever we pick will be able to reflect our student population.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone in the room with us have any questions? Anybody on Zoom?
Anyone on Zoom have any questions?
Questions? Great.
Okay. And with that, then I am actually going to pivot over to the next presentation, which is around our strategic plan.
What's the next step with these HQIM materials?
We're going to actually be going back to and having some conversations with some additional teachers and some internal conversations, because we would like to bring a recommendation back to Education Affairs in February, and probably will bring the materials with us and treat a portion of it as like affairs so you guys can see and put your hands on exactly what it is that we plan on recommending. We do have all three of those material packages here still at administration. So if you are interested in coming by and looking at them, just let us know.
Thank you. I was like, I'll be here.
All right. Dr. Scriven,
Yes, ma'am.
do you want to,
I'm not going to tee this up for the sake of time. Could you fast forward to pillar one, please?
Yes, I don't know how to look. Oh, it's 8 o'clock already. We're sorry, y'all. Okay, so
Are you really? I think it's our Fridays.
good deep conversation. Thank you, Ms. Ferraro.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. So we wanted to provide you this evening with our year 3 strategic plan update. And we are going to quickly go through each of the pillars so that you can see where we are. And I also will remind you that we're following the same format that we have previously used. So there is actually a year 1 and then a year 2 strategic plan update that looks very similar to this. And this is our year 3. So we will actually be starting with our mission statement and our vision statement. Again, these were revised when the strategic plan was created and rolled out. And there was the development process where we engaged with many different stakeholders. There was some focused framework creation, and then we're now in this phase 3 around execution. And these are what the pillars actually look like. Great little graphic. And we're going to get now into the actual reporting out. There were action plans created for each of these pillars, and those action plans are living documents. So obviously they have changed over time. However, you will see that we have a report out on each one. So I'm going to add that. Ms. Gurman, come up first. And Chad. Hey, Chad.
Sorry.
Okay, hey, everybody. Hello. Hi. So we're gonna talk about Portrait of a Graduate because it's a great update. So our goal this year was to take the work that had been done previously and actually start taking it out to the community to try to make some sense of it, to get feedback from our community members, our families, our students, our staff, our leadership team, and refine and then have some to present to you.
You should introduce Chad though.
I'm going to right here. Yeah. I got you. So part of the work that we did was supported by Mr. Evans, who is our consultant from the IU, from the Bucks County Intermediate Unit.
So I've had a pleasure of meeting a few of you already, but I work for the Bucks County Intermediate Unit as a supervisor of educational planning. Every IU is different and we provide different services. And one of the things that I do in Bucks County is provide support to superintendents and school boards in the comprehensive planning process, which is the state mandated piece of it, but then also provide supports for strategic planning and other initiatives. The thing that I love to do the most is be in community with others. And I always say a successful meeting is when people feel seen, heard, and valued. And so in the work that I've had a chance to do here in Cheltenham with Ms. Gurman, I'll say that I feel seen, heard, and valued in these meetings oftentimes. But it's been a real pleasure. We've had a chance to work with Dr. Scriven and meet with a student group and collect a lot of feedback, both in writing and conversation and video. We've had a chance to meet with PTOs and parents, and we've had a community event, lots of survey data. We have a lot of rich quantitative and qualitative data to support the changes. And the nice thing for me coming into this process was there was a lot already in place. My job was to lend a new eye to that process and to support the great work that's already happening here in China. So I want to let Rachel talk a little bit about those numbers, because numbers tell a story. But again, the question about the qualitative data is what we really valued is hearing from others about that.
So Mr. Evans is a wonderful thought partner and offered some great insights and suggestions in terms of how we could connect with people in all the different ways that we might. And so we sent a combination of surveys, in-person meetings, small group meetings, focus groups over the course of the last approximately year plus. So our student survey, we just surveyed our secondary students. We had 737 student responses. We had 365 teachers and staff over the course of the last year. We focused a particular professional development day in the spring on that feedback, and that's 2 of the photos that you see here. We had posters around the room where we had each of the teachers look at the first iteration of our Portrait of a Graduate competencies, offer feedback about what does that look like for you as an adult in your life? What does it mean to be resilient? What does that look like in your classroom? And then what might be the steps that you would take to support students in finding that same competency? Then we had 108 community members in the survey that we sent out to the community. And then we also had focus group members. The 80 number represents both the PTO meetings that we did in most of the buildings in the district, as well as Dr. Scriven was kind enough to let us join for 2 of the superintendent focus groups with our students. And we got a lot of really great feedback there. We did a similar sort of activity with them where they have small high school. They walked around, they looked at each of the competencies and back for us around what they saw, suggestions that they had in terms of the structure of the language as well as the words themselves. So we got a great plethora of data. We also did a community meeting that some of you were able to join us for, where we had similar sort of posters around the library or the media, what do you call it? The Learning Commons.
Learning Commons.
Yeah, it's at Cedarbrook. Don't tell Mr. Metcalf that I called it the library. And we were able to get some great community feedback, have some really wonderful conversations there as well. So on the left-hand side is where we started our 1.0. We had 6 competencies. They were single or double word competencies, and we got a lot of different feedback around the words themselves, the structure, and then some of the gaps that people noticed. On the right, we have where we landed and what we tried, to kind of some of the adjustments that we made. So I'll talk through kind of where the feedback was and how that influenced the work that we did. We made the graphic in conjunction with Gemini. It made some really lovely graphics, and we liked some of the students, and you'll see on the next slide kind of a continuation of that theme. So we moved from culturally competent, community contributor, integrity, communicator, resilient, and critical thinker to more of a phrasing. We talked about this idea, instead of being this thing as if it's almost an identity, that it becomes things that you do. And so thinking critically and creatively, we had critical thinker, and one of the really big pieces of feedback that we got from our student survey was the importance of creativity, which was really cool and surprising. Not because we didn't think that students like to be creative, but it was definitely a gap in what we had, and the student group was the only group that included that out. Integrity, acting with integrity. We had a lot of conversations with families and students around the importance of this idea of respect, of integrity, and being able to persevere. And so we wanted to keep that word. Persevering through challenges, again, that idea of resilience. I will own, as a former high school English teacher, I really struggled with the difference in language of culturally competent versus communicator. One's an adjective, one's a noun. Really, it was a struggle for me personally. And so we started trying to also adjust the language in that way. Another piece that came up with a lot of our students and our teachers and our students and our families was around the importance of respect. So communicates respectfully. Serving the community, interestingly enough, that was the one where most adults were like, I can feel about it, it's fine. And the students were really insistent. That was a large piece of their feedback, was they wanted things that had them serving their community, that they wanted to contribute in some way, which was really incredible and exciting to see. That for us, we were like, it's fine. No, we want it. So we were super happy to see that. And then consistently across the board, it didn't matter which stakeholder group we talked to, over and over again, we saw leading with empathy, compassion, some sort of emotional intelligence piece was a huge gap in our original list. And so we wanted to make sure that that was in there. And so this is where we landed what a Cheltenham learner looks like. And so the question is around next steps. So for the rest of this year, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to do a graphic contest. We have a lot of wonderful student artists. And so we wanted to create, as much as it's fun to play with AI, we'd much rather have authentic student creation. And so we're going to have a graphic contest for students to design graphics for the competencies. And then we want to work to integrate those competencies, and we're already pretty close with the high school paths work. We have some great updates for you in our next meeting around that work. And then next year, we want to work on integrating the final competencies into the curriculum cycle. You've seen our curriculum cycle. It cycles around approximately 6 years. So it's not an everybody at once sort of thing, to be clear. But as we move through the curriculum cycle and we rewrite, we want to start embedding that in. But we also don't want to miss opportunities to start that work right away to some extent with everybody. So we also want to work to align the competencies with each grade level and grade band. So what does it look like for these 6 things with a kindergartner versus a 5th grader versus an 8th grader versus a 12th grader? And this was the other thing. Katie can attest, the one day that I was playing with it, I got really excited. Very cute. So I went into, again, AI and Gemini, and I asked it to create the graphic of a kindergartner, and then have, the same system each time, and then just change the child in the middle. And so we actually have a version K through 12 as they get slightly older, and it varies gender and race and clothing styles and anything like that. But they're adorable. And so we have our kindergartner version and our 12th grade version. And the idea is that this could work with our teachers in class to talk about with their students, okay, what do these things look like in my classroom? What does it look like for you to lead with empathy? That was one of the pieces that I forgot. Another piece with the PTO feedback was the importance of leadership. So it wasn't just that you were empathetic. They wanted there to be a piece as well with leadership. So what does it look like to lead with empathy? What does contributing to the community look like in this classroom, or this grade, or in this building? And so we wanted to create graphics to support teachers in using that as part of their classroom forms too. So with that, we pause for questions now, or you're in
I
charge.
think we're all on the same page and that we know we still have a lot to get through. I will pause just to see if anybody has anything they must contribute. I do one thing. I, as a former classroom teacher, really love the idea of having these blanks for classes in the beginning of each year to sort of say, what do these now phrases, right, mean to us as a classroom, as part of a classroom contract, as part of a, generating your own expectations. I don't follow the word rules, but expectations, hopes, and dreams for what your classroom family is, and like, what does it look like when someone is leading with empathy? What does it feel like in our classroom when communicating respectfully? That we can show these things at every level. And so
I think the other piece of it too is because we did actually, throughout the presentation, you'll see what we're doing for 26, 27, although this is the last year of this plan, because we want to operationalize the work that we have done as associated with this plan. I think what is going to be really interesting is the portrait of a graduate is really going to serve as being almost the basis of our district-wide PBIS, because we currently have different and splintering PBIS in different buildings, but this will give us all the common lexicons.
I know places like Louisville, when they, well, I spent some time there, so yeah, exactly. They sort of supplemented this with like a backpack, like your graduate backpack of sorts. And so I know earlier on there were some rumblings of talking about that now. So is that still on? Because when you're aligning with curriculum and things like that, it seems like that took me there. Like, what's some other artifacts will happen? So is that still on the board, like some sort of
Swag?
not swag that we're giving out, but it's like at the end of it's like a portfolio, so it's like once you it's literally called your
K-12.
and so it's like at 5th grade, you've got some things, evidence of these things. Oh, it is. It's literally a virtual. It's a virtual backpack, and at the end of their experience, they're able to pull out things from this backpack and virtually. So I'll pause there, but I'm just wondering any way of memorializing these things along the way and that kind of.
So if I ask a clarifying question, are you imagining it as something like our CCR or college and career readiness portfolio, that kind of work? Yeah, is that what you're thinking?
What's in there? I guess.
So
we don't need to go there now. We don't have to go there tonight.
So, because,
but
because PA, we wrote those standards too. So
like a 26 and beyond, it seems like maybe a 26 and beyond thing, like as it's being woven into the curriculum, there are going to be things along the way that then students can point to say, yes, that is when I led with empathy. Yes, I served my community in this way. And then I think
it's a wonderful idea. Awesome. All right.
2 seconds. One, thank you. Like, that's a lot of data points, those numbers. That's a lot of work. So thank you for diligently collecting all the data. And 2, love the idea of a contest for our students because they're way better than whatever we can come up with in Canva or AI ourselves. So that's awesome. Thank you.
And I do think that reflects the creativity piece that they,
And being leader, all of us.
that they value a lot. And I do think that's something that we reflect consistently. I graduated class of 96 in Cheltenham, and it was a strength of ours then, and it continues to be a strength of ours today. So yay, creativity. Carry on.
All right. Thank you
Right.
so much.
Hi.
So attending to time, I'm gonna spend a little less time in pillar 2 than I typically would, because, you know, this is what you hear from us all the time around this pillar in teaching and learning. But you can see the co-chairs here. There's a number of us, including like just pretty much everybody in the Office of Ed, because we lean heavily into this teaching and learning work. And really here, our goal is to make sure that we have rigorous curriculum design, instructional best practices, meaningful program, and purposeful environments to actually maximize what our students are getting out of their classroom. So you'll see that there are a number of completed tasks here. And I think the thing that I really want to elevate is this idea that we now have a curriculum cycle and we have a high quality instructional materials adoption cycle that goes with that, so that we are now on a steady path for actually buying the right materials, writing the curriculum to go with those materials, and then revisiting as things are changing and moving throughout time. We also were able to stand up EPIC, and we continue to have really vital programming for our students that are most vulnerable in that way. We have implemented a whole lot of replacement resources. A lot of interventions and resources for special education and for ELL students, and really thinking about our gifted framework. There was that presentation that we shared at the leadership retreat where we are continuing to work in the gifted space around identification of students and making sure that all students have access to that programming based upon, you know, a true framework. And the thing that I think has been really important is this idea that we now as a district have an instructional framework and an assessment philosophy, as well as the aligned calendars, because it's helped put all of us on a cycle around what data we have for students and how people are actually able to access the data and use it. We also have been, I always forget about this huge lift because it's very strange because it feels like it didn't happen. But we reconfigured the district. Totally forget
Oh,
that.
yeah, that.
Oh, yeah, that. We reconfigured the district. So moving the district to a K-5 model with the 6 to 8 and actually reducing, especially once the construction projects are done, the transitions for the students. But I did want to shout out, you know, our Ms. Sharice Nelson and also Dr. Curtis Callens in terms of those academy models that they have put in place, because they have really built community in those places. We've implemented the new STEM course, and we also have really explored Linkit and started using all of the facets and the abilities of that. In particular, data warehouses, we're leaning towards being more data focused. So what we want to do moving forward is making sure that we are actually operationalizing our continuous school improvement methodology, which is making sure that we're looking at, you know, the multiple measures of data. And then from there, taking a look at perception data, because that speaks to how people actually feel in the buildings and what their experience is, and making sure that we incorporate all of that data into how we plan for continuous school improvement. Because obviously, how kids feel in our buildings should drive what we do. I don't necessarily know that we have been explicit about that, and I think we need to be. Because still students that are seen and heard and feel as though they're connected to an adult are gonna learn better, even if we are in the process of really aligning our instruction to standards. We can do that all day long, but if the kid doesn't like coming to school, they're not gonna learn. So there's a piece to that we have to continue to speak to. These are all of the things that we have done over time and really thinking about how they're all linked together. Just a nice little graphic in terms of screeners. Making sure that we actually have all of the pieces together for kids to have a good experience in school. And then what we're doing moving forward, making sure that we're continuing with that adoption cycle in terms of high quality instructional materials. There also is a piece of legislation coming down the line around the universal screening piece. So we have had Fast Bridge for the past 2 years. We are not necessarily sure that Fast Bridge is going to be on the universal screener list that the state is going to actually release, but we now know that we made the right move in terms of having a universal screener, because that is now going to be required by the state. So there's that piece of it, and making sure that we are also finalizing pathways and options for the high school as we are trying to ensure that students are exploring and getting into the courses that they want to take. So any questions there? Lots of teaching and learning stuff. Lots and lots.
Dana, any questions? Any questions on you? Good. Ariana?
Good evening, everybody. We're going to provide an update on the work that we've been doing for our students' social, emotional, and mental health. This is our committee. Our goal is to always just increase and provide support services for our students in the building so that we can alleviate barriers to their academic achievement. So some of our completed tasks is we're continuing to implement our comprehensive MTSS program. I did mention to the principals this afternoon that we still have work to do. However, if we kind of take a poll of our counterparts, and Diane was on the meeting as well, the framework that we've created, the interventions that we have put in place, the grid that we've created, and just the overall system, we're well ahead of our counterparts. We actually have a manual and a baseline for all of our teams to follow. What we're kind of working on now is really getting into the buildings and helping them with their process and building capacity for them to implement the interventions to the students, building the capacity within the classroom for those interventions to be put in place. We're working with our CHOP program, 2 initiatives. One is leveraging data, and that's where we got the feedback about how great our program is, where we kind of hone in on our process and figure out a goal for this year. This year, we're going to look at creating a standard operating procedure for how our teams are analyzing the SRSSIE data. So once they receive it, then what are they supposed to be doing next with it? So that is something Diane and I will be working on and planning for them by June of this school year. And then the IPT ASC, I have no idea what that acronym means, but I know what the program is. It's an anxiety group that our mental health and wellness counselors being trained on to pilot at Cedarbrook around February of this year. Piloting it this year with the goal of expanding the program into the high school for next year. We administered the pay survey to our 6th, 8th, and 12th grade students. We did get our preliminary data last week. And we should get the full report in the spring. And as you know, and as I've stated, this is what we use to really guide our conversation on what programs and what services our students need the most. We partner with Prevention Academy, which is through St. Joseph's University. And they offer town halls to our students at Cedarbrook 7th and 8th grade around vaping and the concerns with that. It's a good organization and it's free. If it's free, it's for me, and I will definitely bring it to the district. We have implemented second step K through 8. We had sessions earlier in the school year for our K through 2 teachers, and then we had some follow-up asynchronous training that took place during one of our early dismissal days. We also have a digital license for 6 through 8. It's a slow go because it's one extra thing that a teacher has to do. But as we're, again, building capacity in our classrooms, I told the principals today, if there's anything they need to assist with this implementation, my office will be happy to provide that support. Deborah, through a grant, is working with each of our buildings as needed, as requested. They're able to go into classrooms and provide coaching and also provide support to our principals to implement second step within the classroom. And then we have our mentor groups running in grades 6 through 12. We have 3 organizations that are listed in the next slide. We have Make the Distinction with Ms. Alex Ingram. We have Families and Communities on the Move with Mr. Chris Pender. And then we have the Pathfinders program, which is at the high school. And Naja Ruiz is the facilitator of that girls group, which is actually doing really well. At times we struggle with getting the high school students to commit. She has the girls group that meets during Panther Prep. And I've been to about 4 sessions and they are committed. I don't know if it's a Chick-fil-A, but they're showing. So these are some of our mental health providers. They're kind of our trusty dusties. We have gone with them through day one. They're consistent and they are still within our buildings and servicing our students. And we've expanded, as you know, Aldersgate K through 12 and Myers has it 2 days a week since they only have 1 counselor. We still have our Lakeside counselors And then we partner with Lakeside to offer a climate and culture staff to Cedarbrook Middle School. In lieu of them losing their full-time mental health and wellness counselor, we did contract out so they could get that additional support. We Are Hope is back with us in a different capacity. They are actually free this year. They bill students insurance. As a result, they're still working out some of the kinks with that. But they are servicing at least 4 to 5 students from our 6 through 12 grade, from our 6 through 12 buildings. And then Lincoln Center finally provided us our drug and alcohol counselor. She started last week. So we're working on her entrance and exit criteria. How referrals are going to be made to her, but we should have her for the next 2 years. Our next steps for this year, we're going to be submitting a PCCD grant in the next 8 days. And that will just offer us some more funds to bring in additional program. In past years, it's been more for services and agencies. This year, we're going to work on training for our staff and our leaders in regards to trauma-informed practices. We're going to analyze our 25-26 phase data once we receive it in the spring to see what services we need to bring in for our students. We're going to continue our partnership with the Lincoln Center to see what type of building support they can offer us at a discounted rate. We're going to analyze the effectiveness of We Are Hope. Again, it's a slow go. However, as they get moving in regards to billing for insurance, seeing how effective that programming is, and then expanding it potentially to our younger grades. And then we're going to continue our implementation and support for second step within the classrooms. So now I'll pass it on to Diane. She's going to talk about our MTSS progress this year and how we're kind of expanding our support. I love having her position. She is in the building, she's at the meeting, she's helping to problem solve. But one of the great things that she did this year was she identified the early warning indicators and link it. She ran the report and she shared it out with the teams to help drive their conversations, and then she will tell you the rest.
This is an example. Hi, everyone. This is an example of a 5th grade early warning indicator. There's a lot of columns here. There is the report tiers the students into the group. There's an overall percentile and it compares students to each other. And then some of the data points are like attendance, FastBridge, IXL, SRSS, which is the student risk screening scale, internalizing and externalizing. And also, so the FastBridge, there's ELA, A reading, auto, there's math, A math, and math CBM, as well as Swiss. The blanks are if the students don't have any behavioral incidents. This is an example of an 11th grade EWR, and they have attendance, Swiss, SRSS, and PSAT. So the EWR, it does just suggest tiered placements for students, and the school teams uses this report as a discussion point along with their classroom data and knowledge of specific students to be able to plan for their needs. And in the next 3 slides, these are the suggested tier distribution. Wingcoat for Glenside, for CBK, high school, and Epic.
Diane, real quick, can you back the early morning?
Sure. Oh, I'm sorry.
And is this what you're showing up here for an 11th grader? Is this for one student?
No, this is for, actually, I didn't put it in here, but each row has a student.
Okay.
Yeah, it's multiple.
Yes, it's multiple students. It's for the whole grade.
The whole grade,
The
okay.
whole grade.
And so these reports for the grade are being used then to guide placement into those tiers.
Well, it's used, so these are different data points, but there's also, so if like, let's say there's a tier 1, there's like these students are tier 1, but there are high risk or elevated scores in certain areas. So that drives discussion as well as teachers' knowledge on the student to be able to plan individually for the student. So although this has suggested tiers, they may have a tier 2 plan on like social skills for lunch bunch or counseling. So it's just a discussion point, and they use that data as well as classroom data.
So the grids you showed after that with the proportions of kids in the different schools? Is that simply based on the rough percentages of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, or is that actually what each of the schools has?
No, those numbers are based on this report.
Okay.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
So it's the early warning.
so
indicator.
it's their real,
Yeah,
their
and-
real numbers.
and it's suggested tier 3.
Can you remind me what SWIS stands for?
Yes, it's
Provide information system.
thank you.
Yeah, it's data. It's
School-wide intervention system.
Information.
Oh,
Is where they house discipline data, but not like incident management. It's more for it's a data point. So you would bring it up during PBIS to say, let's say disrespect towards a teacher is happening at 3:00 in this particular classroom. So it's more for us to analyze when behavior is actually taking place so that it can inform us on if there's any systems within the building that we need to change to address it.
Does that also include though, if a student has been suspended or? like-
Yes.
Okay.
So this is a very interesting, very informative report so that the school teams can discuss this child as a whole child, not just like one specific data. Yeah. And the process is that this report flags potential concerns for students. The teachers review this report and their classroom data, and the MTSS team discusses and determines next steps. So even though, like I said, an example could be a student can be in tier 1, but they have an elevated score in one specific data point, so that student receives tier 2 supports.
How frequently are teachers receiving the reports? How frequently do they access the data points? I mean, I'm assuming that K-5 teachers are accessing them at a different rate than 6 to 12.
So this information would just go to the advanced tiers team, the MTSS team.
Okay.
And so teachers typically will access their data before they have a grade team meeting, and that's what prompts the discussion to then do either a tier 1 checklist or a request for assistance. So, but this data is just to that particular team.
And it is generated 3 times a year, and 1 has already been generated.
Thank you.
And the school team also reversed this district intervention grid. These are some of the academic interventions. This is the district,
These are
behavioral, social, and the next, we also have the skill areas for mental health, attendance, and social interventions that can be provided to students. Overall, this report is great because we're able to see the student as a whole. Have any other questions?
Ms. Loman?
I'm assuming when you say all students are included in this, you mean all students, so students with IEPs?
Yeah.
Okay. And is there sort of like a separate flag, like if some of this is related to the goals of their IEP?
That would be what the team then discusses.
Okay.
So if it's a part of a goal, then they don't move forward in the process. That would need to be an IEP team meeting. If it's something that's new behavior or a new deficit, then it can go through the MTSS process.
Go ahead, Dr. Watson, then Ms. Starks.
Thank you for this great introduction to what it sounds like the district is doing across K-12. I'd be really interested in knowing how this K-12 summary translates into building by building programs for a comprehensive approach within each building for social, emotional, and mental health, guided by the district's plans and available interventions, and also guided by your counselor's expertise and people, and how this is adapted to the students. That obviously, that's a
There
you
will be
can
my
answer right now.
presentation in March.
Excellent.
So I'll be able to
Right.
go into that a little bit more. This was a broad
Yeah.
overview, but I'll definitely go into more of the weeds with programming in March.
I've made remarks about MTSS and the contracts and the legislative meeting, so I won't repeat it all again this time, maybe in March. But specifically, what stands out to me tonight is we have pretty much over the last few months, we've approved contracts like the Alders Gate, the Pathfinder. And so one thing that is showing is that doing business with the school district seems like it's a process that you can get through and get to the work and get to the students. So that's not always the case. And so we have our business manager here tonight. I think that's part of, they play a role in that. You all play a role in that. So definitely kudos for making it easy to do business with the district, especially when in service of our students and staff.
I never get any pushback from Josh.
Okay, well, we need this? Yes, let's do it, right? Especially when free as me. I mean, what was I gonna say? Also, that definitely stands out around the PCCD grants for training. Appreciate hearing that. But this might be a really basic thing on the charts, like slide 29. When we're looking at the, I guess, like, yeah. This is telling us how many students in the building are receiving some type of MTS.
No.
I guess so. Yeah. What is this actually?
It's not, I'm sorry, is this percentage or actual numbers?
I'm sorry,
It
it
is
is
percentage, but
actually
can't be-
actual numbers.
It has
I'm
to be
sorry.
actual numbers,
Okay.
right, to add up.
These
Okay.
numbers are based on the early warning indicator report. It suggests how many students are in these tiers.
That's what. Okay. That's.
And ideally, you want the majority of your students in tier one.
Yeah. And I guess at some point, the way we were talking about it is like all of the students at some point will be somewhere within, could be somewhere within MTSS.
They're always in tier one.
Yeah.
They all receive tier one, but they need additional. Or and they're.
I guess that's where this is specific to early warning indicators.
Yeah.
The different table would say everybody's receiving. Okay, cool.
What I wanted the team to do, so often when we are talking to you guys about MTSS, we're doing it at a high level, right? So I was just trying to give you a little more in terms of examples of how we actually operationalize the MTSS process. You guys have heard me mention early warning indicators forever, but I wanted you to be able to visually see its direct impact to both students and teachers.
Mr. Schultz.
I don't think I would check off my bingo card appropriately for this meeting. I didn't do the idea of disaggregating data by need, by race, by other demographics, because it strikes me that this kind of early warning indicator, comparing it to who ends up receiving different supports, and then possibly even to cross-cut with disaggregated data, can show where we are failing our students from an equity lens and opportunity, or empowering our students from equity and opportunity. Just throwing that out there. I know that that's like one level deeper that won't make it here, but I'm excited you're collecting the data and that you have access to.
So we do this in March.
Sure.
If we can just do it disaggregate, then that would be good.
Yeah, I mean, just because I was looking at our equity policy just because of triggering some memories of seeing these kind of data that helps us know.
Perfect segue to the next bill.
There we go. Thank you.
Real quick, I don't want to put in the spot, but all done some of that when they get to work, you can back. Actually, about the disaggregation.
Thank you. Thank you very much for social, emotional, and mental health update.
Your time is.
Welcome.
Welcome.
And welcome back.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Pillar 4,
diversity, equity, belonging, and inclusion. Our section may be the shortest, but it certainly is by far the least important. In fact, what you've heard throughout tonight, you're going to hear this is embedded everywhere. And what Dr. Scribble will talk about probably later on, how this will manifest itself moving forward as we redo our strategic plan for the next phase. And one thing, since I am the director of special education, I want to be clear that we're not, you often hear the word inclusion when it comes to special education, but in the terms of this pillar, we're talking about all students, diversity, equity, belonging. And there we are, ShaVon and I, as our co-chairs, our primary goals, strategies, and performance measures have not changed. I think the biggest thing here for our strategies is, and again, I think you mentioned it, Mr. Schultz, other people here, is we communicate transparent, consistently about our initiatives and progress, and we use that through a variety of multi-sources of data, subjective data or survey data, just conversations which we've had here tonight. So our list of completed tasks is a little shorter. To be transparent, we have not moved forward as much as we wanted to. We've acknowledged that. We talked about it in depth today. But our work, as I took some notes, because as I've gone through this, it is embedded in all these areas. So we have updated and reviewed our cultural proficiency framework, which we have. That is something we always do. It's kind of like next month when I talk about our special ed framework that was created 2 years ago. It's a living, breathing document, which I mentioned there in number 2. We continue with our professional development and the regulations that we have. We reviewed the previous work led by our cadre representatives. They are cultural proficiency leaders. Correct. We have representatives in each of the buildings. At the end of last year, we brought them all together, really started to have some really good in-depth conversation to kind of bring to resurface the work of what we've called cadres, I believe, prior to my and your arrival, doing that work within the buildings. We've established those leaders in each building, and we want to resurrect that moving forward. Not resurrect that, but bring it more to life. And then what was already mentioned today, earlier with Katie, when she talked about the high quality instructional materials. Our committee and our work does always have a lens, and I think you mentioned it earlier, in reviewing all the materials to make sure that it brings and reflects our community of students and staff. And then we have 2 pages. I'm not skipping, I'm just letting you know. We have 2 pages of next steps. And a lot of these, if you go back honestly to last year when we went over this, a lot of this stuff is repeated. To be transparent, because we didn't get to it yet. No, we didn't get to it yet because we want to do it and we want to make sure we do it right. Now, with that said, I do want to mention that through Dr. Pimental's work with this principals in CSI, there's survey information that talks about how children feel and how parents feel. But, okay, we use that as a data point. It was mentioned about students feeling seen and heard. I think you mentioned that in teaching and learning, right? That's all part of belong. We talk about, you mentioned the algebra piece, right? And screening students in and bringing down those walls. That's inclusion and equity. We talked about, you're going to hear in the social emotional piece, MTSS, that's all students. And you just saw data there. So the diversity, equity, belonging, and inclusion, that's not my bedtime, I promise. It's close though. But the work that we have to continue to do, okay, is embedded in all these pillars. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah,
I can read these, but
no, you don't have to read them. I will be quite honest that like some of the work in this pillar in particular, because this is my pillar, kind of slowed down, especially with the reconfiguration and then the fall that we had. So it is our hope that now I have a little more free time that we will be able to reinvigorate this process, because what we had been doing last year and with the organizational chart that we have, the actual cultural proficiency teacher leaders in the buildings actually were reporting up to the assistant superintendent, and our committee was meeting with them regularly last year. We just haven't had an opportunity to do that. I do want to shout out a couple of teachers who reached out to me and said, Savage, where you been? Like, I don't understand. So we are plotting and planning for what that looks like for the remainder of the year. But honestly, a lot of this was just about capacity and bandwidth and us having to prioritize what we were moving along and when.
Miss Collins with Dr. Robinson at Glenside. You're going to hear from me next month as a special ed month, right? At our Ed Affairs, and I do have some good survey data already that I'm collecting that'll talk about parents and their feeling in terms, and of course, that'll only be through the lens of families with students with disabilities, but it's still a good snapshot of the work we're doing.
Questions? Do we have any questions?
Not a question, but really quick, just staff, oftentimes within Debbie, like staff engagement, like beyond, and maybe that's in the researching best practices, but beyond like trainings and things like that, but staff engagement and inclusion.
Absolutely. There's actually on one of these slides, there is a mechanism by which we are supposed to provide a survey out to staff every year around how they feel in their, like how they feel in terms of community. And that goes into that perception.
Cultural proficiency survey.
Yeah. And that goes into that perception data. And as we are actually, like our teachers participate in the perception survey every year. So there are questions that actually address some of that. I think that what we want to do moving forward is dig deeper into that and then find ways to make sure that teachers have an opportunity to continue their learning in Debbie. And also, I've been thinking hard about how we can better celebrate our teachers and like make them feel included in a different way, because they have been doing some heavy lifting and hard work, to be quite honest, and just making sure that we're celebrating them appropriately too is something that we want to focus on.
Yeah, definitely hear you on this. And the pieces that beyond training and making so definitely.
How they feel in the building, whether or not they feel supported. We have done a lot of work around induction this year to make sure that, you know, our new teachers, both like first and second year, feel supported in a different way. And we actually appointed a teacher leader for that, and she's been doing a fantastic job. Her name is Dr. Scott. She's over at Cedar Brook. But you know, how do you actually make people feel supported and provide them with the opportunity to develop agency as well?
Yeah, that's great. And in addition to your point, the disaggregation of that subject that through lens academic, essentially. Absolutely. Thank you.
Mr. Burdell Williams, sorry, do you want to say?
These are two very brief. You don't have to come again.
That's all right. One more over here.
Trying to put my coat back on.
Well stated. One is just on my bingo card, one quick edit, maybe second to last bullet point from the bottom. I think the intention of the state is tends to be historically Black colleges and universities. As a
it's I see, and the university.
And
Hispanic Associate. Oh, it's separate. No, it's two separate things.
It's two separate.
Yeah, so I should actually name that. Yeah. Historically Black college. Okay, I'll make sure I got that.
Yes, it is.
Listen, there was a lot going on today.
All right. I want to
thank you.
Know.
Absolutely.
And then just overall, just about this pillar, generally speaking, right? In my time on the board, I've watched our equity journey. And it is not one that, you know, wrapping back to the conversations around basically everything we've talked about today in some way, has been touched by the previous cultural proficiency framework, cadres of individuals who existed in the building. Happy that we're still here talking about it. I am also, as one board member, very encouraged for what will come of it in the future, knowing that our journey is still very much so in the beginning phases, and acknowledging as well that we are further along than very many other school districts across the nation, and happy to be on the board of a school district that is in that part of progress, but also want to acknowledge that their support for the work, from my perspective as one board member, understanding how critically important it is for creating all the things that we just identified and important just a moment ago. Those are in fact the individuals that we are presenting into this great nation and world as a representative of Cheltenham School District. I'd be happy for them to carry all of those things in their backpacks, whether virtual, written, however we want to build that in. So just wanted to leave that comment here. For recognizing that outside of this particular room and maybe outside of my opinion, there is a differing opinion in the world that I don't consider. This board and the work that the community are doing and want to support that. So I support the work and understand that there have been some other priorities recently. Excited.
Very short. Policy 829, our equity policy. Not sure the last time it's been updated. I'm also not sure the last time the administrative regulation has been updated. And I just wanted to flag that as potentially whether it's an explicit bullet or just a passive thing on your mind. It might make sense for the policy committee to look at that, revisit that policy in light of where we are in our strategic plan and what this generation of administration has identified as our equity goals, needs, and practices.
Great idea. 'Cause we actually we looked at the policy.
I'm sure yes, right.
And at that point in time, we didn't think there was any need for any revision or anything of the sort. And we did actually update what was on the website in terms of just cleaning the language up, taking some grammatical errors out, but we have actually used that to drive the work. And I echo what Dr. Katchenbohm has said. A lot of what we have been doing is kind of just normalizing the lens through which we see things, including policy, including how we're selecting materials, including how we're building curriculum. And it's so funny because, we had a whole conversation today around suspension data, and it was an automatic lens through which we were reviewing. Like, when we have to disaggregate this data and see how kids are being affected based upon their demographic data. So just thinking about those things is incredibly important.
Yeah, and I just would echo what you said, having been in other districts, this district is really just, the conversation doesn't have to be elevated, it's very encouraging. All students are awesome.
So my free to move on.
Carry on. I don't see any Zoom notifications, so we are good.
No, so while Dr. Savage is still here, because I'm going to bounce past to her for one comment. I do want to acknowledge Mr. Evans, who you guys met earlier, who assisted Ms. Gurman with the portrait of a graduate work, because he will, you guys will see a proposal that's coming forth in February with the facilitation of the next genre of our strategic plan work. So I'm glad he's here to hear this whole conversation and also to hear board comment and feedback. A couple of things, and the reason I was kind of pivoting between Debbie and the climate and culture, and we had kind of spoke about this a little bit at our board retreat on January 10th, is that the thinking, even though we need to go through the process, is potentially the work under Debbie and the work under culture, climate and culture, is going to be two pillars that will be condensed, where we go from 7 to 5, with the hope being that these two pillars will be integrated in everything that we do day to day. One thing I appreciate that Dr. Savage did as an upgrade to our board agendas was where, and Zachary, Mr. Epps appreciates it because he always likes to connect budgetary items to the strategic plan, which is fun. But she calls out what pillar aligns to the things that we're bringing forth in the board agenda. We know our work around culture and climate, and also Debbie, we're going to have to be much more explicit in our action plan in terms of what are the metrics that we're going to be looking for, and what are the day-to-day actionable, operationalized practices that we're going to see happening on a consistent basis. How's it going to be measured? How's it going to be monitored? Because this work touches everything. So just wanted to let you guys know, and I wanted to say this with Mr. Evans here, even though we'll be the ones doing the heavy lifting, he will be the one helping to facilitate and move us through the process. So this work had lived under Jonathan White for a little while. It's going to come to me temporarily, and then we'll see where it goes from there. But there's a lot that's going on under the climate and culture. One thing that I just want to bring to your attention is there will probably be budgetary implications with the Center for Safe Schools, who's come out. They've done a couple of audits thus far, predominantly the high school, the middle school, and Cheltenham Elementary. The recommendations, there have been some that are going to impact the grant that Ms. Smith is working on along with Mr. Swiger. And then there will be a full-blown report once they've done all of the audits for the district as a whole. So just kind of be on standby as we continue to move that forward. The work that we're doing at the high school, there's a climate and culture component to that work, which I will call out in our next strategic plan, but I'm not going to call it out in one sport. I'm going to call it out holistically through our athletic program, but knowing that we have a potential sport that we have to have a laser focus on. When you talk about systemizing some of our practices, you heard a couple people alluding to the K through 12 administrative meeting that we have today. Part of that meeting, there's always safety agenda topic, which is led by Mr. White, where all of the administrators at one time get to hear best practices or feedback on current safety upgrades or mini PD opportunities. Dr. Savage uses that to push up to the state level as the documentation for criteria we have to meet, making sure that as a district, we are having that meeting holistically with all administrators, and it's something that is happening with Fidelity. There were components in our program where our upper level students were pushing down to our lower level students through programs and different initiatives. That is happening with Fidelity as well. And this is where this integration comes in, because when you look at anything like with PBIS is directly related to MTSS. We're going to have to look at how we're reporting out our data differently under climate and culture. You heard it alluded to a little bit today around the perceptual surveys and the belonging surveys. That's another touch point that's directly related to culture and climate, but it's related to the Debbie work as well, right? So it's just where those things are intertwined that, again, we just have to call it out. So this piece has happened, the formalized stipend for, the welcoming and wellness. And again, that's a component that's under the mental health and social emotional piece. Again, that touches every pillar. So you can go to the next slide. Next steps, we talked about the implications of safe schools. Dr. Thomas, and I tell you, it's only been 4 days, maybe 5 now. I'll count this day, I'll give them 2 days. But when you talk about standard operating procedures and the work that lies ahead of us, these are definitely things that we're going to memorialize, so we're all on the same page as a district. It was nice. All the principals were here earlier. We're talking about this potential inclement weather that's coming Sunday and the Monday and the Tuesday. Principal Teller already pushed out a communication that he sent to his faculty and staff. He shared that with all the administrators. So if they so desire, they can have a similar scripted communication that goes out, district wide. So it's the little things that we're seeing where there's some collaboration coming in place, but that needs to be a standard operating procedures, not just something where we have one administrator taking the lead to try to impact the district as a whole. This is an area that's of high interest that I got to figure out, right? We not just how do we expand community engagement, but how do we harness it in a positive way, right? We have a lot of energy right now around the safety components in the district. I have a couple schools where it's a little more high energy than others. How do we rein in our parents and use them as partners and a resource where we're all on one team trying to accomplish the same goal? So that will be some interesting dialogue. And I think that might be it for climate and culture. So, any questions? I'm sorry.
Do you have any questions?
The recommendation for standard operating procedures that Channel Ross to make the implicit, explicit, or the explicit.
No, you got it right.
The standard operating procedures for suspensions, expulsions, et cetera, is that referring to the literal actual, like this is the form we use, this is the.
Correct.
Okay.
And the principals and I have a rhythm around like what this looks like, because there are a number of actual policies that I walk Dr. Thomas through that are actually implied, based upon like how the board has crafted those policies. But you have a policy, and then the policy becomes an administrative regulation, and then the administrative regulation is usually the directive for us as district level administrators in terms of like how we implement the policy. And there are things that are attached to some of those ARs that I don't know have been widely communicated, shared with principals. So how do we then create a protocol or a standard operating procedure for the principals so they know exactly what to do and what to collect in all of those different circumstances? What have been happening for the past, 18 months? And I don't want to make it sound like it was an everyday thing, but when there was a suspension, for example, the principals would call me prior to the suspension per board policy, because I was the designee for that, and I would walk them through, okay, so let's look at the student's actual behavioral record. Are there any issues with special education or 504s that we need to be aware of? What was the actual infraction? Was this the first infraction? Was this the second infraction? Was this the third infraction? Did you actually do a full investigation? Where are the written statements? Send them to me. I can't just take you on your word. Where's the actual investigation, right? And like help them to process through that prior to issuing the suspension, and then keeping track of what we were doing so that we could actually determine whether or not we were seeing patterns. Because the other thing too is like you have the suspension data that goes into Power School, and then you have Swiss data, which is like your majors and your minors, making sure that the Swiss data for majors matches what's in Power School around these suspensions, and then like pattern spotting. Do I see a hot spot with a particular teacher? Do I see a hot spot with a particular child? How are we putting services in place for a particular child if we do see that, or even the teacher? So there are different, I think, things that live in my head that I have to get out of my head and onto paper so it can, become part of what we do just as normal operations.
Just speaking as one board member, I know this is, and I've spoken to Leah, about this as well. I know this is something that we're hearing a lot about from families, their concerns about safety and climate and culture, and I think it dovetails with the work that Ms. Smith's office is doing across the district. And so I would just like to have us consider how we as a board are really talking about this and reporting out on it on a regular basis, because I think it is such a high intensity topic, particularly right now. A lot of work is being done, a lot of really good work and we're getting asked about it all the time. Absolutely. And making that something that we might be a way to be more proactive and responsive at this time. So just again, one board member's suggestion.
I would agree with that, and I would also add that if the board were to come up with a framework by which, or a dashboard or something, I can't say dashboard to say, but if there were certain data that you would like us to actually report out on a regular basis, we could do that because we actually do pull and look at data. Like we looked at all of the actual disciplinary data up through January 8th, both of last year and this year, and compared it. That was pulled today, and we actually are not seeing an uptick. I think there's something going on where it feels different, but our numbers are pretty steady. So I think that there also is, based on that perception data and how people are perceiving what is going on and how they're feeling about what is going on versus, the actual data. And I think a big part of it for not just the board, but also for us as administration is how do we build something that is public facing, that's on our website that families can refer to. We quietly published an education blueprint where all of our course offerings and all of our course descriptions are currently up and educated. And I don't know that families actually know that it's out there, but like thinking about that kind of stuff and like what we're putting out and then how we're actually communicating that it exists is going to be incredibly important.
Feels like the bottom bullet point, the community engagement period around a lot of areas. So that families know what's going on and they are included in the process. Mr. Schultz.
I don't know where this would fit if not climate and culture, this question. It's around cell phones and the strategic direction of our district in terms of next steps for cell phones. Would that fit in this pillar on the current?
Absolutely.
And as part, okay. And then not on the bullets, which is a question of more, if we know the impact cell phones are having on our young people in this community, and we know that it would require systemic iteration and probably lots of community events focused on discussing what it means. At what point and how do we start moving that ball forward?
Absolutely. So there currently is already a technology and device policy. In our student handbooks, we have consistently K-12 and an off and away kind of implementation of that policy. And honestly, where we see the most trouble with that is at the secondary level. At the 6th to 8th level, it is less about compliance than the 9th through 12th grade level. 6th through 8th grade, we might see it flaring here and there, but you can correct a child in 6th through 8th grade, and typically it ceases to be as much of a problem. It is rampant in high school. And a lot of that is not just implementation at the teacher level, it is at the parent level. I can tell you some anecdotal notes where I have been in the high school and stopped, because I have friends at high school. I call the kids my friends. And I have stopped at a friend in the hallway and who are you talking to? And they turn the phone around and it's mom, it's dad, it's another kid across the school on the other side, and they're trying to find each other during, Panther prep. Like it's a different kind of culture, but it is less, as far as I can tell, malicious than people would think. We do have events every once in a while that grow out of social media, but there definitely is this piece where I see the kids are addicted to it in just using it all the time, but there is also an adult implication where I think some of the community engagement in education is going to need to be directed at the adults in these children's lives. Because we can actually do a cell phone ban. I can guarantee you the kids are going to sneak the phone in anyway, and then we're going to have a different implementation issue, particularly if they are being told that it's okay by the adults in their lives, which very much might be a thing because parents like their kids to have phones.
So it occurs to me that if it became a priority, and this would be a conversation for leadership and Dr. Scriven, but multi-pronged approach that includes policy, I'm sure.
Yep.
As well as community, public service announcements and training.
All of those things. And you probably are going to, at that point, have to look at your disciplinary matrix that is attached to the board policy around student discipline and add something around that. Because what are the escalated consequences if a student consistently has their cell phone used?
Thank you. That's a big can of worms.
Can of worms. Bottle worms.
Well, it could be a bottle of worms that's imposed on us though, so maybe just get ahead of it.
Yeah.
We have talked
Very
about
fair.
it actually. One of the reasons why we didn't list it as a bullet is because you know how big it is. But we've been trying to pull it out.
Sorry, that's my role.
No, we had a bet. Somebody's gonna bring it up, you know.
Oh, yeah.
No question? Do we have any questions on Zoom? Anything on Zoom? I see no notification. Right, you would see like a red number up there.
Yeah, actually.
No.
Wonderful. Communications, welcome.
All right. Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
Hello.
How are you?
Right, thank you for waiting.
So we'll get right to it. If I can move this slide. No.
What else?
There, okay. So our primary goal with communications is to develop and sustain diverse structures of communication to cultivate and strengthen two-way communication and build mutually beneficial relationships with our stakeholders. So how do we go about doing that? We've got our strategic plan, our short list of items that we've completed this year. We've finished the social media response plan, which is in action now. We reworked the Office of Education landing page, supported the Office of Education and Branding instructional framework. We created a brochure. Continue to work with our social media liaisons, those are our stipended teacher leaders in our schools who do social media for us. Very important because we can't get to all the schools and be on the ground and see everything that is going on. And then supported the streamlining of communications sent out to the school or from the school and the district. Been a lot of letters this year. We're trying to figure out what lane things go in, and I think we're making good progress. So next steps, welcome ambassadors in conjunction with Steve Katrinbaum. Got a meeting on the books with UPG to talk about that. Try to set up some sort of network of willing parents who will buddy up with a new parent. We're going to work on the Family Communications Hub. Just a list of some of the items that are going to be on there. I'll probably add on the branding information and the logos, that sort of stuff. And then we're just going to continue to embed the CSD branding work that we did a couple of years ago into our messaging. And that would be, excellent academics, life outside the classroom, diversity, and the strength of our community. And that's all I have. Any questions?
Questions, work? Any questions?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. All right, since everyone gets to hear from me an hour a month, I'll keep it relatively brief. And since I'm the last person before we all get out of here, and you've heard this all before, over and over. So the last pillar is the infrastructure, facilities, and finance. Obviously, this strategic goal is around addressing some of the most significant facilities issues within the district and finding a way to address those facilities issues while not handicapping the district in terms of cost, working our financial and our debt structure to match our facility structure so that we can maintain our district's financial positive financial stability. So we began this process 3 years ago. We used existing facilities assessment data. We took that data and we matched it with updated future enrollment reports with the study conducted in Montgomery County. And we matched it with updated construction data by engaging an architect to assist with creating projections and scenarios on how we could address our facilities issues and replace some of our oldest facilities. So it wasn't a big surprise. Our oldest facilities obviously were Elkins Park at the high school, the core of which are 70-year-old buildings. Both of those buildings have various degrees of repairs that occurred to them over the years and needed various degrees of upgrades. So completed tasks for those goals were to replace Elkins Park rather than building a brand new building and do a one-for-one replacement, which is the most straightforward solution. We looked at an alternative solution, which was to add additional capacity at Glenside Elementary and to add additional capacity at Cedarbrook Middle School, both of which are much smaller projects than building one brand new school, both of which come with a much lower price tag than building a brand new school, and both of which allow us to restructure our grades, which is a more standard model, which is a K to 5, a 6 to 8, and a 9 to 12. That gives students less transitions as they progress through Cheltenham School District, and it puts all of our kids all of our students in brand new facilities at less of a cost. At the time, it was estimated that a brand new school would cost somewhere in the realm of 60, 70 million, which has held true based on some recent bids that have occurred since we made that decision. And as you know, we just recently bid these two projects at $25 million, so much less money. Also part of the infrastructure, we didn't want to leave out the high school, so we wanted to address some of the significant older facilities and wanted to add some equity at the high school for our students, and that was the high school stadium project. In the center here is an up-to-date picture before the snow, and that is the gatehouse. A structure actually has risen from the ground. It's taken some time now, but we're actually starting to see some physical structure process in that part of the project, so I included that photo. As you recall, Glenside and Cedarbrook, we have bid those projects. We have solid numbers, and we are ready to move into the construction phase. All right, next steps are to continue to oversee, manage, and monitor the Glenside Elementary and the Cedarbrook Middle School addition projects. Some of the progress movements we put in place are the monthly progress reports, the monthly spend reports. And of course, we always provide pictures. It's very easy to see progress with buildings and facilities much more than other areas of the district because things are very in your face and tangible. The next piece of the infrastructure project we need to address is upgrading the HVAC at the high school. The plan has been to add a better heating solution and better cooling solution for what is one of the more older pieces of infrastructure at the high school. Also, in conjunction with the closure of Elkins Park School, we need to develop a plan for the future of the site. And we haven't really had that discussion, obviously, because Elkins Park School is in active use, and there's no reason to discuss the closure of that site at this time. But within the near future, within the next couple of years, we will have to develop a plan to close that site, which may come hand in hand with the next piece, which is providing administrative office space for Cheltenham School District. While we all love this facility and nostalgia from this facility, it has its distinct disadvantages.
Would you like to be specific?
Warm, safe, and dry. I don't know that we need any of this.
That's criteria, is more safe and dry, that's what you're built for.
All right, in our strategic plan, we had 3 different goals within the first few years. The other 2 goals were around addressing staff absenteeism. So I kind of built that into goal number 2, and around trying to find ways to improve operations of the school district and make it more efficient. So a couple things we've been working on, almost a different initiative per year, is creating standard operating procedures. And the first one we worked on was on a requisition process. Requisitioning was a paper-intensive, paper-heavy process that has been turned into an electronic process that everybody can follow and understand is the same regardless of what position you're in if you need to create a requisition. Also standardized budget reports weekly to all staff who do requisitioning. So year 1 was honing in on that process. The next year was eliminating paper absence requests. So we've turned that into an electronic process as well. That even can be done on a phone app. So I feel like we advanced that process decades in the future from where it was. An electronic time clocks so that we can have real life attendance from our staff and real life reporting to our payroll department. So we're trying to increase the access to information. It's not instantaneous. To give something that our principals can log into every single day and see who's in, who's out, who's the substitute they're expecting to fill in for that position, and who is clocked in as a clock. And that was to address our goal of decreasing absenteeism, giving management more tools. Obviously, there's still more work to be done contractually in that department. The second piece was around creating efficiencies on the finance side was providing more transparency, standardized reporting, and information about the district's budget process and the state's budget process. So we talk about the F1 timeline. You keep seeing that chart regurgitated and the timeline regurgitated. And I feel like each month we talk about what's happening in the state, what the district is required to report, and how that relates to the budget process. So I think over time, we'll continue to drill that into everyone's head until they know what to expect each month and it becomes somewhat standard. All right, next steps, we need to continue to increase the use of our real-time time clock system to all corners of the district. We need to work on some of our contracts to make sure they align with the district's initiatives, goals, mainly employment contracts. And we need to make sure that those contracts don't put the district in a position we would lose our financial stability or our financial structure, or our sometimes called our financial leverage. And we need to continue to work on developing standard operating procedures amongst all departments on the operating side, and make sure that, just like our requisition process, it is consistent, it's the same regardless of who you are, what building you work in, so we can continue to develop efficiency. That was it. Worst one.
Do you have any questions from our? Any nothing on? Double. Hey. I mean. You're in the meeting?
So moved.
Second, I'm like,
All in favor, say aye.
Would have been real bad.
Our meeting is adjourned.
I love the switch. I love the switch. Now you're like,